In 1848, a few shiny rocks were found in a river, and suddenly, the world rushed toward California. It was January, a cold, ordinary morning along the American River, deep in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada. A carpenter named James W. Marshall was overseeing the construction of a sawmill for his employer, a man named John Sutter. The work was routine. The days were long. Nothing about that morning suggested the world was about to change forever. Then Marshall looked down. There, beneath the shallow, rushing water, something caught the light. Small, irregular, unmistakably bright. He reached in and pulled it out. He tested it between his fingers. He bit it. He showed it to his workers. None of them had the words for what they were feeling, but all of them understood instinctively what they were looking at. Gold. Marshall rode immediately to Sutter's fort to deliver the news, and Sutter, a man of considerable business sense, understood at once that this discovery was either the greatest fortune or the greatest catastrophe of his life. He swore his workers to secrecy. He tried to contain it. He wrote desperate letters. He made men promise. But a secret buried in a river is not a secret at all. Within weeks, a local merchant named Sam Brannan walked through the streets of San Francisco holding a small bottle of gold dust above his head, shouting for everyone to hear. By spring, word had spread through California. By summer, it had reached the East Coast. By the end of the year, it had crossed oceans. President James K. Polk confirmed it before Congress in December of 1848. The gold was real. The quantity was staggering, and the rush, quiet at first, like water gathering before a flood, had already begun. When news reached the East Coast and the far corners of the world, something extraordinary happened. People stopped what they were doing, and they left. Farmers walked away from their fields mid-season. Factory workers put down their tools and never came back. Sailors reached port, looked at one another, and simply abandoned ship. Entire crews disappeared overnight, leaving vessels stranded in San Francisco Bay. Dozens of empty ships rocking gently in the water, their captains helpless to stop the desertion. They were called the 49ers, named for the year 1849, when the flood truly began. They came from the American East. They came from Mexico, from Chile, from China, from Australia, from Ireland, from France. They came from everywhere a human being could come from, all of them pulled by the same invisible thread. The routes were brutal. Some traveled by sea, sailing all the way around the southern tip of South America, a journey of 18,000 miles that could take 5 to 8 months. Others chose a shorter but deadlier path, crossing the Isthmus of Panama through dense jungle, where malaria and cholera waited in the heat. Still others crossed the North American continent overland, traversing deserts, climbing mountains, and praying the winter wouldn't close the passes before they made it through. Many never arrived. Disease swept through crowded ships. Starvation stalked the overland trails. Wagons broke down. Animals collapsed. Men who had left home with hope and savings died alone in the dust, thousands of miles from anyone who knew their names. Shipwrecks claimed hundreds more. Violence, always present at the edges of desperation, took others still. And yet more kept coming. Because the dream was powerful enough to survive the reality of the journey. Because poverty at home felt more certain than danger on the road. Because gold, even the rumor of gold, does something to the human imagination that very little else can match. By the end of 1849, California's non-native population had grown from roughly 14,000 to nearly 100,000, and it was only just beginning. There is something almost impossible to picture about what happened to California in those years. Towns did not grow. They erupted. San Francisco, which had been a sleepy settlement of barely 1,000 people in 1848, swelled to over 25,000 by 1850. Tents became streets. Streets became neighborhoods. Neighborhoods became cities. Rough, chaotic, loud, and alive with the energy of people who had gambled everything on being here. Lumber was scarce and expensive. Men built what they could with what they had. Canvas walls, dirt floors, wooden storefronts with painted signs promising goods, services, and comfort that were rarely as advertised. Hotels charged fortunes for a cot. Restaurants charged fortunes for a meal. And people paid because they had no choice and because tomorrow, always tomorrow, they were going to strike it rich. But life in these boomtowns was dangerous in ways that went beyond hard weather and hard work. There were no established laws, no reliable police, no courts that could be trusted. Disputes were settled with fists, knives, or worse. Gambling halls ran through the night, and when a man lost everything at cards, desperation often followed him into the street. Crime was common. Justice was rare. And when it came, it sometimes came in the form of vigilante mobs who appointed themselves judge and executioner in the same breath. Money moved fast through these towns, and so did trouble. Yet there was also something remarkable in the chaos. A raw, democratic energy, unlike anything America had seen before. Men from completely different worlds found themselves sleeping in the same tent, working the same river. Wealth and poverty existed side by side, sometimes switching places overnight. The social rules of the old world didn't always apply out here, and while that created danger, it also created possibility. But for every story of possibility, there is a story of devastation. The gold rush did not arrive in an empty land. California was home to hundreds of thousands of Native Americans, people whose ancestors had lived on this land for millennia, who had built cultures, languages, and communities across its mountains, valleys, and coasts. The miners did not negotiate. They simply came. Native villages were burned. Families were displaced. Communities that had survived for generations were shattered in a matter of months. The violence was systematic and relentless. California's Native American population, estimated at over 100,000 before the rush, was reduced to fewer than 30,000 by 1870. Historians have used the word genocide, and the evidence supports it. The destruction extended in other directions as well. Miners fighting over claims turned rivers into battlegrounds. Gangs preyed on travelers carrying gold back from the hills. A man could work for weeks, accumulate a small fortune, and lose it or his life before he reached the nearest town. The promise of gold attracted not only the hopeful, but also the ruthless. And in a world without strong law enforcement, the ruthless often won. For many who came chasing the dream, California became the place where they learned exactly how brutal a dream could be. Here is the truth that the stories don't always tell. Most miners never found gold, not in any meaningful quantity. They worked from first light to last light, standing knee-deep in freezing river water, sifting pan after pan of sediment, and came up empty day after day, week after week. They grew thin, they grew sick, they grew old faster than they should have. The gold was real, but it was also finite, and it was already running out faster than anyone admitted publicly. The men who truly prospered during the gold rush were rarely the men holding the pans. They were the men holding the supplies. Merchants who set up shop in the mining camps charged extraordinary prices for ordinary goods. A single egg could cost what a laborer elsewhere earned in a day. Flour, boots, shovels, rope, everything was scarce. And scarcity meant power for those who understood commerce better than geology. One man understood this particularly well. A young entrepreneur from New York named Levi Strauss arrived in San Francisco not to mine, but to sell dry goods. He eventually partnered with a Nevada tailor named Jacob Davis to produce a sturdy pair of work pants reinforced with copper rivets, durable enough to survive the brutal conditions of mining life. Those pants would later carry his name around the entire world. Levi Strauss did not find gold. He found something more durable. Step back far enough from any event in history, and you begin to see its true shape. The California gold rush lasted, in its most intense form, only a few years, but what it set in motion cannot be measured in years. It can only be measured in the country that came after it. California was admitted as the 31st state of the United States in 1850, fast-tracked by the sheer weight of the population that had poured into it. It would go on to become one of the most powerful economies not just in America, but in the entire world. The demand for faster transportation between East and West accelerated the push for a transcontinental railroad, which was completed in 1869, stitching the continent together and making the United States, for the first time, truly one nation in practical terms. Immigration patterns shifted permanently. Chinese immigrants, many of whom had come during the rush and stayed, built communities that transformed California's cultural identity. Immigrants from Latin America, Europe, and beyond left descendants who are still part of the American story today. Banking, finance, and commerce expanded rapidly to support the new economy of the West. Cities grew. Infrastructure followed people. And the idea of America, restless, hungry, convinced that something better was always waiting just over the next ridge, was reinforced in the national imagination in ways that are still felt today. A single morning, a single man looking down at a single river. And from that moment, an entire nation tilted westward and never fully tilted back. They came chasing gold, but what they really created was a new America.